This playoff season, there's only one place where we'll bet, FANATICS Sportsbook. Yes, they're our presenting sponsor, but it doesn't make sense to bet anywhere else if you're a sports fan. When you bet, you earn fan cash, win or lose, which means that your bets get you closer to accumulating fan cash for authentic jerseys, hats, memorabilia, and more. Winning hits different with fan cash. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Connecticut residents call 800-789-7777. Massachusetts residents call 800-327-5050. New York residents call 877-8-HOPE-NY. Maryland residents visit mdgamblinghelp.org.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to perhaps the most improbable Eastern Conference Finals podcast. I am going to be joined here by the great Caitlin Cooper of Basketball She Wrote, as well as the great Samson Folk of Raptors Republic and other publications from across the border. And of course, you know him well as the detail junkie, the defender of Julius, the doctor of jump shots. My man DJ Zullo is here with us as well. This is a KFS X's and O's special presentation where we have the privilege to be joined by Caitlin and Samson. You guys probably know Caitlin well. Basketball She Wrote, one of the great thinkers of our game, one of the great writers of our game, just a brilliant analyst of the game. And Samson, if you guys aren't familiar with Samson from like the IQ RJ Barrett, cross function New York, Toronto, they're basically a sideshow at this point from the New York Knicks. He should be, because he is the best there is at breaking down the Raptors and the NBA at large. He joins Caitlin during their playoff runs. They've been doing amazing work. So it is an honor for us, DJ, I speak on behalf of DJ as well, to have you guys with us to break down, again, what is maybe the most improbable Eastern Conference Finals in NBA history. Got to be close. And here we are. Pacers-Knicks starts Wednesday night. We're recording this on a Sunday afternoon, so we're going to give a lot of time for people to digest. And we're going to talk about the X's and O's of the series. So how is everybody doing? Caitlin, we'll start with you. What's going on?
Doing well. I was just reminiscing with Andrew before we started that at the end of our pregame pod in February, we both said, well, see you again next year. We don't anticipate doing this in the playoffs. So definitely wasn't anticipated on behalf of the two people that cover these two teams.
It's unbelievable. Samson, what's cooking over there? How's Toronto?
Doing good. Yeah, it's sunny out. It's nice. Also, Knicks fans might know me because my tweet gets every time OG does something funny in an interview, yeah. My tweet about the type of candor you're supposed to have in discussing things with him pops off. So people might have seen that. My advice on how to unriddle the unriddleable OG Anunoby.
Unbelievable. He's the best. What a character. Yeah. Age, how we doing, buddy?
Man, I'm just happy to be here. I am surrounded by three of the best basketball minds in the business. I'm super stoked about this series, and it's been a great day for me. Had a overpriced smoothie bowl with the kids, shot some hoops. I'm ready to go. I'm over caffeinated. Like this is really good times right now, and really happy to break down what should be a fascinating series with the three of you.
Awesome. Oh, before Andrew gets mad at me, I should say this is presented by FANATICS Sportsbook. So there it is. I did it, Andrew. All right. So look, I think we all came to the table here with some kind of foundational questions about the series from a schematic standpoint. And so I think we'll just kind of take turns pitching a question, and then we'll go around the table and discuss how we think it's going to go, what the different adjustments might be throughout the series, and we'll take it from there. So Caitlin, let's start with you. What is kind of your number one question when you're looking at this series? Hit me with it.
So mine comes from something that the Pacers actually never did during the regular season. So naturally, it seems like it applies greatly here. It's about Aaron Nesmith. So my question to the group is, which I wrote a long piece about this, but I want feedback from people who have watched the Knicks far more than I have. Should Aaron Nesmith guard Jalen Brunson or Karl-Anthony Towns? And to give some background on how I came to this question, in Game 3 last year of the Eastern Conference semifinals, the Pacers made the adjustment to put Aaron onto Jalen Brunson instead of Andrew Nembhard. At that point in time, Aaron Nesmith kind of got billed as the quote-unquote Jalen Brunson stopper. I would like to push back against that a little bit because that also coincided with Jalen Brunson's foot injury, number one. And number two, what I felt was more impactful is that Andrew Nembhard was available to be guarding in the gaps as their most impactful off-ball defender. And Pascal Siakam then, after OG Anunoby's injury, was roaming off of Precious Achiuwa a lot, which was allowing Aaron to press up closer to the ball. So these two teams are a lot different now. Game 1 of the regular season happens. Pascal more tethered to OG Anunoby. Jalen Brunson roaring to the Madison Square Garden crowd that he's asserting his dominance over Aaron Nesmith. Game 3 of the regular season happens, and the Pacers make a starting lineup change. Aaron Nesmith back in the starting lineup for the Pacers, opposite of Jalen Brunson. I think Benjy and I talked about this. It felt like Jalen Brunson really wanted to prove his dominance in that matchup at the beginning of the game at the expense of Karl-Anthony Towns, who was being guarded by the formidable front court of Thomas Bryant and Obi Toppin in that particular basketball game. To this point in time, long story short, Aaron has not guarded Karl-Anthony Towns. By my eye, Karl-Anthony Towns has been limited somewhat, both in terms of his involvement and his efficiency when he's been guarded by smaller players, in part because how the Knicks attack. So to all three of you, Aaron Nesmith, guarding Jalen Brunson or guarding Karl-Anthony Towns?
Samson?
Okay, I'll go first.
Yeah, hit it.
I have long been of the belief, obviously the numbers showed up in your article, Caitlin, which everyone should read, but Karl-Anthony Towns is a guy who is affected greatly by who's standing across from him, what archetype of defender, and for whatever reason, be it his own proclivities or let's say the Knicks, what they want to get into offensively. Even this goes back to the Wolves as well. When you put a wing or a guard on him, it does kind of make it more difficult for him to know how to implement his own offense. And on the one hand, it's like I do think Nesmith is a better fit to guard Jalen Brunson because of his size and what it allows, as you said, Caitlin, the Pacers to do off ball. However, I do think that there is, and I guess this is just your article, by the way, Caitlin, but having Nesmith there for screening actions off of Karl if they want to involve, as you said, it may just end up putting Nesmith on Brunson anyway. And it also gets to start out every possession by putting, Karl-Anthony Towns in that same paradox that he's completely gets wrapped up in when he's being guarded by non-bigs. So I think it's worth a shot. As you know, Caitlin, and as anybody who listens to our podcast knows, when you come up with some like, hey, this is kind of odd, but I'd like to see it, I always say, yeah, dude, let's see how it works. So that's kind of how I come away from it. And Nembhard, a little bit chance of redemption, maybe if he's on Brunson, maybe he's feeling himself a little bit more, who knows? But I would give it a shot.
Yeah, I think you almost have to go that route. And I will say, I think Towns is probably, after the Boston series and after seeing it against Detroit too, I think he's a little more equipped to counter that in the post. And you're seeing him in, whether it is post-ups or whether it is offensive rebounding, I think he is taking advantage as well as he can in terms of weaponizing wings guarding him. And I'm heartened by the fact that he has been a little bit better. And I've been talking about this for a while. Instead of trying to bulldoze his way to the basket against wings, if he can just face up, rip and go, I think he's a lot to handle. And you saw that in Game 6 against Jaylen Brown, and then against Horford a little bit too, where if he makes quick decisions, he can get there before double comes and he can get all the way to the basket on a single dribble. He's really ineffective. And I think, Caitlin, this is probably where you're going with this as well. He's largely ineffective against post doubles, especially coming from the bottom or the baseline. He hasn't solved that. Now, he's better when he can face and see where the coverage is coming from. But if he's trying to back down and it's Miles Turner roaming, that he can get into a lot of trouble in those scenarios. So listen, I would be a little concerned about Nesmith in terms of foul trouble, but in terms of like how to start the game, I think you have to go that route. The only question maybe is whether Siakam is the guy to do it, or do you sort of use that in spurts and not maybe go that route? Because it feels like Siakam, at least physically, can handle that. I don't know if that means now you bring another screener into the action and you're getting a secondary step up, or you're doing something to maybe involve Siakam in that action. But it feels like he physically can handle it. I do wonder if Nesmith has the bulk and the physicality to ultimately push Towns off his spot. But if Karl is doing what I think he should do, and that's like facing rip and go, I think he could be pretty dominant. But if he's falls into the scenario of just like trying to back his way in, off balance, doubles come, he's not seeing it, then I think the Pacers are going to make out pretty well in that sort of matchup.
Yeah, I think Nesmith is the interesting I think probably most people watching this will say, isn't Neesmith like option number 3? I mean, let's break down the options. You have the Turner option, which would be the traditional matchup that, to Caitlin's earlier point, almost all teams have gone away from putting their traditional centers on Cat for all the reasons that we've discussed. We've been talking about this all season long. It was something that was going to happen when the trade was made. We knew Hart would be the guy, the center's guard. It allows now your best shot blocker in Turner to roam and clog everything else up the way Luke Cornett did in Game 5 against the Knicks. And that's been the traditional coverage now against the Knicks since basically January. Even if it was present all the way back in preseason, it became the coverage starting in January. So let's assume they're going to go to some route where not Miles Turner's guarding Josh Hart. Is that the safe assumption, Caitlin?
In this scenario, it would be. To be honest, I'll be surprised if they go to this in Game 1.
Neesmith, you mean?
I'll be surprised if they go to a cross-match in Game 1. In my long term, I think that they're going to get to it, but I won't be surprised in Game 1 if it's Miles Turner at the center spot.
Wow. That's interesting.
What they've done the entire regular season. The only players that have guarded Karl-Anthony Towns are Turner, Bryant, Ijax, and Toppin when he's been at the 5.
It's just with all of the evidence that has mounted since even the last Pacers matchup, it's like, I mean, that would be such a breath of fresh air. Now, not to say Turner can't make things difficult on Towns, but all of a sudden now you open up the pick and pop game, which hasn't been available to the Knicks in 5 months, essentially, which is crazy.
They'll back it, but to DJ's point, Towns has been really good against the Pacers centers at attacking quickly out of face-ups and getting downhill out of fake handoffs. They can't close out to his right hand for some unknown, inexplicable reason to me, but
so what's the downside to Siakam as opposed to Neesmith? Like, why is Neesmith the one you went to?
Neesmith's been better against Brunson, and I'm assuming that Cat's going to set the screen. And when they do, if they bring another screener, and let's pretend they want Halliburton as the screener defender, Siakam getting over the top of that. The inverted actions against Milwaukee were quite poor. Samson probably has more evidence to this than I do, but over the last year and a half, there's many things that Siakam does well, and their impact numbers are astronomically better when Siakam is on the floor, but that's mainly about what he does off ball. I'd be a little bit nervous about him defending in space repeatedly against Brunson up at the top of the key. So that's kind of where I lean with that. And also, just real quick, if you're starting Nembhard out against Brunson and anticipating that screen, you're going to be playing the Knicks much deeper into the clock, and the foul trouble is going to be mitigated against Neesmith because Nembhard's going to be a lot better at pressuring the ball without fouling. But I'll let Samson speak to those things.
The late clock thing, when I was poking around, the Knicks are one of the best. I think they're a top 2 team in the playoffs so far at hitting shots at the back in the last 4 seconds of the shot clock. That's obviously not predictive in the playoffs. It's just I had the stat in my head. So
it's not predictive, but it's that's been a Knicks thing since Brunson came aboard. They are very comfortable there now. Sometimes too comfortable, if you're asking. I think DJ would agree with me, but they are very comfortable whittling the clock down and letting Brunson make a play at the end. Yeah.
And just honestly, Neesmith, I think, is more aggressive. I think Pascal obviously is a bigger body to that point, but Neesmith, I think, is really aggressive, really feisty, and will, of course, harken back to what we were talking about at the top, which is that Karl, despite obviously having improvements over time, it does, if you're trying to identify a potential weakness against one of the best shooting bigs of all time, a guy who is, when he has his game going, he's something to behold. Trying to put him a step back or kind of get him off rhythm, you do that. Now, obviously, Caitlin, I don't know if that happens in Game 1, but I do think that. And yeah, also when it progresses into later matchups with, screens, switching and all that kind of stuff, Pascal, I don't think you want Paul George up above the break, nimbly, bimbly, around everything. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing is, and I think if you watch the series last year, Brunson obviously had a great Game 1, solid Game 2. I think his performance against Nembhard has been a little overrated in the sense that the shot making because he wasn't getting to the rim and he wasn't even getting into the paint a lot. It was a lot of left elbow, right elbow, just shooting over the top. And listen, he can do that against Nembhard, who lacks the size to really affect his shot, but it's still a 45 to 52% on the high end attempt in terms of the field goal percentage. So if he's making those shots at 52%, it's going to be a hard series for the Pacers. But if it's more in the range of, 45 to 48, I think you would live with that in the sense that you're not gaining so much you're not risking the foul trouble as much. Brunson getting to the line, and you're keeping him out of the paint for the most part. Cause that's where I think Nembhard did a really good job last year at times, just keeping him walled off. It was just Brunson was so good in that intermediate mid-range area, just making really tough shots. I mean, they were fallaways, pivot aways, just a lot of shots that he was taking and making. It's a really good contest from Nembhard. So I think and you look at games 3 on, Brunson had a pretty inefficient finish to that series. So I think it would be, if I'm a Pacer fan, I feel a little more comfortable than I think the national media is suggesting regarding Nembhard just being cooked by Brunson in every game. I don't think that was really the case. It was some great shot making, but I don't know if it was sustainable shot making over a 6-7 game series.
Nembhard's better at playing it contained, and Neesmith's a little bit more ambitious and certainly has the more length. For me, it's almost like through these 3 games in the regular season, they had more trouble containing Karl-Anthony Towns than they did Brunson. And because of that, like just by the numbers, his touch is 19.2 per 100 possessions when he's defended by guards, 31.2 when he's defended by centers. It's a lot of he gets marginalized. It's a lot of idle standing. So if the Pacers, if they can just get him standing next to Aaron Neesmith on the wing, and they're funneling more through the Brunson, Josh Hart pick and roll, which is a capable action, I just think that you have to be happier with that if you're the Pacers than what they've seen through the 3 regular season games.
Yeah, I that's why, if they do come out with Turner in game 1, and Caitlin, you know the team better than anybody, to me, that's a huge win for New York. Like, however many possessions you can get to before Carlisle realizes he has to make that switch is like a bonus, because most teams have both the Pistons and the Celtics almost came out game 1, first possession in that kind of coverage. So that'll be interesting. Just kind of like an offshoot of this, of course, is the Pacers full court pressure. Like, they are a team, probably more than any team in the league, that provides that 48-foot pressure. I am fascinated to see how the Knicks deal with that. What I thought was encouraging was in game 6, they started really, they began having a concerted effort screening at half court for Brunson, whether it was Hart, whether it was Cat, to just try to free him up. How much does Brunson even bring up the basketball and deal with all that pressure? That's gonna wear him down. And then McConnell comes in, and that Pacers second wave comes in, and they'll also apply all that pressure. The Knicks right now are 7 deep. So to me, that's kind of an interesting push and pull in the series, is how the Knicks deal with all that pressure, the wear down on Brunson. Does Josh Hart bring up the ball a little bit? How do they free him with those step up screens high up the floor? What do you guys think there? And how are they going to, how do you think the Knicks should approach that to kind of break down that pressure a little bit?
I can tell you that the Pacers kind of have a tendency to go overboard with overs when teams counter with the 3/4 court and half court screens. And sometimes that works in the offense's favor. Because if you're giving up an odd man advantage at 3/4 court, and Miles Turner's, sometimes they even have Miles Turner up at the level of those screens at half court, and he's having to cover that much ground. So sometimes I've seen that be fairly effective. They dialed some of that back against Milwaukee, which I thought was to their benefit, at least when Giannis was the bring up ball handler, which will certainly be different in this matchup.
What Brunson does so well, like when it's not just using those screens, it's the fact that he can reject them with, he's so good at that. Get you one, now you're off balance. In game 6, you can watch, I would say 7 or 8 drives happen just on half court screens that he rejected. And now the whole defense is trying to figure out who's covering. Is there going to be a scram switch somewhere? Like, how are they? And the Knicks got a ton of action out of that. I wonder if the Pacers will stay with it, if the Knicks can counter. And again, like, how much does Hart bring up the ball? Deej, what do you got on that?
Yeah, well, I think it speaks to the overall, like, my big concern coming into the series of, you mentioned 7 guys, and Campaign technically is in the rotation, but he's getting spot minutes in the first half, if that. And it just feels like, considering the amount of ball pressure, considering the mental stress of having to get back on makes, misses, and to do that in that gauntlet for 48 minutes a night, playing 7 guys, you talk about the ball pressure. It feels like how the Knicks hold up if this series is extended 6-7 games. Like, what is this team going to look like towards the end of the series? And I think it's, of all the things we could talk about, the Knicks being at 7 guys and the Pacers going, 10 deep and playing with that pace and that fervor for that extended amount of time. It's the biggest question coming in. Can the Knicks withstand that, and how do they do it? I think it has to be some Brunson off ball. I think the advantage of having those screens set at half court or even deeper is that you can give Brunson a chance to get deep into the paint, which in the half court, when the Knicks offense has bogged down, it's been a lack of gravity on the on-ball creator, whether it's Bridges or whether it's Brunson. They need someone to get deep into the paint, not a paint touch where you're outside the restricted area. Are you creating a reaction by the defense? If you are setting screens at half court and you're playing odd man or even 4-on-4, I think you have a better chance with that sort of space to create those. And that could be an advantage for the Knicks. But again, we saw the amount of driving Brunson had to do in the Indiana series last year. That's a hard way to play. If you're setting those screens up and then your big is now, whether it's Towns or Hart, is pretty much out of the play. You saw that with Hartenstein last year. You can set the screen there, but now you're effectively, your role game is non-existent. You can play Turner in a drop and you can corral and you can keep the big out of the play. Now, how Brunson can attack that, that's where the Knicks will get the advantage. But it is a hard way to play offense. And if Brunson is driving that many times a night and it's a lot of work, then you wonder how that can withstand over a long series. I think that's the biggest concern going into this for the Knicks from my perspective.
Yeah, to that point, I think it is a huge swing in the series because the Knicks will be able to get opportunities with the ball in Brunson's hand. It's just about the totality of it. And it's like, can you do this repeatedly over the course of the game? And also, if you move the ball into Hart, like he might get pressed as well. Like the Pacers throw guys, like there could be a few different guys who are still chasing him the whole time. And I do wonder if Brunson is able to be, like, the efficacy of it is so good, as you say, like getting downhill 7-8 times in the past game, just like breaking down, getting into the paint because of it with the screen rejects. Can he move the Pacers away from that? Do the Pacers take the long view regardless for the series? How does that shake out? Really, it gives them an advantage, but it also does conform play into something that favors the Pacers. That's what makes it such an interesting push and pull.
Right. And it is an every other night series, I think, right? I don't think there's any. Mm-hmm. So that's an interesting wrinkle here that I think plays into the Pacers' advantage. I mean, you never know with these things, but with the amount of minutes the Knicks guys are playing to play every other night with travel, it's asking a ton. It's asking a ton from this Knicks roster. Deej, what's your big question for the series? Hit us.
Yeah, so I think the double big lineup for the Knicks, Towns and Mitch, how effective can those two be against this Pacer team? And is there a specific lineup that you would unleash that against in terms of like how the Pacers are playing it? You know, I do worry about makes or misses they're pushing. How does Karl navigate that? Are they getting matched up? We have the Mitch guarding 7, 8, 10 players in one possession against the Celtics. That's made the rounds. That was an amazing performance by him in that single possession, but really the whole series of guarding in space. But I do wonder about being able to play those guys, 10 minutes a night and being effective enough as offensive rebounders and as defenders in space to really make it worth it. And if not, because that was a huge advantage for them. And it's been that way for the playoffs. They're plus 13 in the minutes they've played. If you can mitigate that advantage, then I think it's a problem for the Knicks. But the question I have is like, can they be close to as effective against this Pacer team as they were against Boston and as they were against Detroit?
Kaylin?
I actually think that could be an effective wrinkle, especially if they pair it. I would be very careful if I'm Tibbs to pair Mitch's minutes with Obi Toppin's. If you can get the double bigs out there when Miles and Obi are out there, or if they're going super small with Siakam and Obi, maybe. But if you could match it with Obi, I think it could be effective because here's what I will tell people. The best way to limit the Pacers' pace is to attack the offensive glass. The Milwaukee Bucks would not do that. It's against Doc Rivers', ethos as a coach to be sending multiple players to the glass. If you do that, that's typically what affects them the most. That's why they looked as bad as they did against Cleveland when Cleveland had a 20-shot advantage against them. It will slow the pace, and also the basketball is the most important part of basketball. I say that a lot, but it's true. Mitchell Robinson opens up offensive rebounding opportunities for other players on the floor too. Because if you have to smash down to him, now Josh Hart might get loose. Now somebody else on the perimeter might get loose. And the other thing that I would say too is his presence might impact how the Pacers are able to defend as well. Because if they're very concerned about the offensive rebounding opportunities that the Knicks can get, they're not going to double Jalen Brunson. They may not even be that active doubling Karl-Anthony Towns in the post because they might think, we got to stay home. We're not going to try playing zone on those possessions because there's going to be too many holes. Like, he could be a coverage preventer. I don't know what words you want to say. Coverage deterrence in terms of what the Pacers are able to put out there. So I think it might be a little bit trickier if he's out there when Siakam is, because Siakam is a cross-match buster. And I'm guessing that they would probably try to put Mitchell Robinson onto Siakam and chance his shooting more than they'd be willing to chance Miles Turner shooting and having him guard the pick and pop. And Siakam can be pretty effective against those fives. And when he's defended by fives, they'll just use him as the screener instead. Like in game 5 against the Cleveland Cavaliers, he set 26 screens for the Pacers. He was the most frequent screener for either team, which led to some pretty good things between he and Halliburton in the third quarter. So that's an aspect of it. They're very magnanimous with who they're willing to use as a screener and when, depending upon who's out on the court and where their advantages are going to be.
Man, my guess would be that when Mitch is in there with Turner, he would guard Turner the same kind of way you thought that they'd start with Turner on Cat. Is that Tibbs, although he's gone a little less traditional in the last couple of series, to all of our, we're also proud of him. He's a pretty traditional guy, and so I don't know if he'll cross-match to Siakam in that matchup. I actually would think to start he wouldn't, but that'll be an interesting wrinkle. I mean, but to your point, Mitchell Robinson in the playoffs has now rebounded over 20% of his team's misses. And that is absolutely absurd. He's rebounding a fifth of his team's misses. And you saw it in the Boston series when he came in for Josh Hart. It was like fascinating because Mitchell Robinson literally can't shoot a basketball. The gravity he had on those pick and rolls, just getting to the dunker spot as a roller, allowed Brunson to play one-on-one. Whereas when Josh Hart was the screener, he's a good offensive rebounder, obviously, but not a lob threat, not a at the rim offensive rebounding threat, more of a guy who crashes from the perimeter. His guy was just draped all over Brunson. He had nowhere to go, couldn't work one-on-one. So Robinson has that gravity as an offensive rebounder, not even as less as a roller and more as an offensive rebounder, which you got to stay attached to him on that baseline. And it's interesting how that might divert the matchups for the Pacers. Samson, anything on this aspect?
I just want to kick it back. Is like when you see, obviously Mitchell Robinson pursues the glass, but when you're watching this, is the end goal is the best thing an isolation in just for Jalen Brunson to have room, or what? Was Boston creative in creating any type of stoppage there? Were there tags that overloaded and they're like, you know what, we're going to let the weak side have something open and still contain Brunson? Or is it just facing the front of the play constantly? Were there any other breakdowns that you guys were seeing that Mitch was able to, bring for the Knicks?
Yeah, to me it was DJ. You can speak to this as also. I think it was pretty front facing, and it was because of the Boston knew they had this. We can roam off Josh Hart at any time. Now Hart made them pay to some extent, which was very good, but I think it was almost like we can simplify everything else outside of that. Which is why you didn't see OG get many open threes. You didn't see Mikhail get open threes until really game 6 when they got all those paint touches that I talked about. But to me, it was we're going to limit the catch and shoot threes for the quote unquote good shooters. We're going to let Josh Hart have whatever he wants, and then we can simplify it that way. DJ, I don't know if you have any different.
Yeah, I think that's on point, and I think the Towns post ups with Mitch in the opposite dunker has been a nice feature because it whether it's Hart in the dunker or Hart spacing to the weak side corner, it just makes it harder for that big to double from the baseline, which, as I mentioned, has been the primary mode of scheming against Towns post-ups. And then Knicks they're trying to lean into that with their, and Benjy, you and I talked about this, where Towns is setting a pin in for Robinson to get to the other dunker spot, and that gives Towns, once he sets that dunker's pin in, really nice post position, which has been sort of a ongoing puzzle for the Knicks to solve. They almost force Towns to have solid position, and that's been nice. And then you're limited to how well and how much you're going to double off those if Mitch is hanging out there, because if you're coming over, it's an auto offensive rebound. So it puts a lot of pressure on the person tasked with doubling, if they're doubling from the baseline, to really affect the Towns post up. So that's why it is more of a, just the physical impact that Robinson and the gravity has on that weak side dunker has been impressive and nice for Towns and the offense as a whole, because you've seen drives too where Porzingis, Cornette, they're not even coming over to help because they're either face guarding or they're trying their best to wrestle with Robinson as the low man defender, and it just makes it much tougher. So if they can, I think that could be something they get into, where offensively I think it's going to work for the Knicks. How it works on the defensive end is where I think you're going to get the full impact on that double big lineup. And there's a lot of concerns there, but offensively, they're starting to lean into some really good stuff for those two playing together. And I think it should carry over for the most part into the series.
Yeah, should be an interesting battleground there in terms of how much tips.
I don't think that Rick Carlisle will be above going to Haka, just as Joe Mazzulla wasn't above going to Haka. I don't think that he will be. I've seen him do that in games. And they think that the rebounding concerns are that exaggerated. I don't think he will be above it. I'm just saying.
That was such an interesting, it's like a side point. Like the fact that Mazzulla went to it as a heavy favorite, and it's not like the psychological element of that was interesting to me. I don't know. It's hard. This is something we can't really know, but like to go to something like that when you theoretically have the advantage in so many other areas of the game was just an interesting, and it's not like the Knicks were scoring in the half court early in the series either. So it wasn't like the points per possession threshold is pretty low. And so to be like, well, Mitchell Robinson, your free throws is even lower. Now, I don't think the Pacers necessarily have the same kind of tools in the half court defense that the Celtics had. So maybe it's a better strategy for the Pacers. But the other thing it does to the Pacers is it takes away that pace a little bit. Now you're slowing the game down. Mitch is at the free throw line, and I don't know if that plays to their advantage. So but you think you'll see some of it, Caitlin?
I've seen him do it. I think that Jakob Poeltl took 17 free throw attempts against them one time when they played the Spurs. I've seen it.
Not to bog us down in this too much, but we keep saying like help from the bottom or double from the bottom. What does it look like when Towns gets doubled from the top one pass away? What do you like? How is that process, and how do the Knicks form up off of that?
I mean, it's obviously an easier read for him. I don't think there's a center or big in the NBA that can really make the double from the bottom read well. I think Jokic is the one, because he doesn't even have to turn. He can have his back turned.
Jokic just throws it backwards.
Yeah, he just throws it backwards, and it's an alley-oop to Aaron Gordon. So I think for generally speaking, it's just obviously a harder pass to make, even when it's coming from above the top of the key. His process, he can get the pass off, but it's like he's not making the pass like when the defender is almost in the process of closing out. It's almost like they're preloaded and then they can close out in one direction.
And he's so reluctant, Samson, and like it's the most frustrating thing. Like when they do send that double, it's like sometimes the most effective, easiest pass that actually generates the three is just to throw it to the entry passer. Like and
then they swing it.
And he just doesn't. He just wants to make a cool pass. I love him so
hold
much.
the ball out with his right hand and just so like hold it there and like.
But he just wants to make a pass and spin around so badly, and so it is better. Like he'll find shooters out of that, and then the Knicks do a nice job of cutting off of it too. Like Hart will dart in from the wing, and he might get something out of that, or someone will cover that cut, and then the 45 cut, and then someone will pop to the other side. So like they'll get stuff out of that, and I think it's better than when they double from the baseline, but he's not the best at reading even that.
The Pacers prefer to double from the top. That's what they almost exclusively do. They moved out of that against Giannis when they started using Gary Trent as the post-entry passer, and they started doubling from the weak side elbow instead. But if Neesmith's guarding Towns and they're fronting Towns, or they're going to a 3/4 court front against Towns, then they will double from the bottom. But
that's interesting.
They typically double from the top, though.
All right, cool. Samson.
It's kind of funny, even just in the structure of everything. It's like, the team's biggest fear is not always what the other team goes to, or at least the fan base, right? Or the analysts are like, this is bad. And the other team is like, we actually don't think is. But to switch it, because a lot of this has kind of been like, how do the Pacers try and solve the Knicks defensively? There is a bunch of stuff. Obviously, the Pacers are one of the best push pace teams and transition teams, but they were one of the best, at least in the playoffs so far, at scoring in the half court. I'm interested. Who is guarding Tyrese Haliburton? What type of screening actions do we see? Is OG Anunoby equivalent to Dean Wade? Like all of this kind of stuff. I want to start there. I guess I'll ask you, Benjy, first. Who do you think is guarding Tyrese, and who do you think will be their most common screener to try and, I guess, loosen him up?
I think Bridges will start on Tyrese, and I think it's less because Bridges is the best matchup for Tyrese, and more because I think they're going to need OG on Siakam to try to eliminate that pressure point. Because I think the Knicks pick and roll coverage is such and inconsistent enough that if you have the pick and roll pressure point and you have a Siakam post up pressure point, they're just going to break down. Like they need to be able to say, you want to throw the ball to Siakam there, we're just going to play a one-on-one. and then the pick and roll stuff we'll have to sort out. So I just think that's how they'll start with Bridges on Halliburton. Because I think that they're going to start traditionally with Cat on Miles Turner, I would certainly anticipate that the most common screener will be Miles Turner, both because you're now testing the Knicks in terms of whether you want to switch, you want to drop, what do you want to do? You want to blitz Halliburton? I think blitzing is probably the worst idea on Halliburton because now you're in the blender. He hits the pocket. The Pacers move the ball so well and so quickly. The Knicks don't rotate all that well when Brunson and Cat are both on the floor. Don't think they can cover out of that. So I think you got to choose or mix it up between drop and switch and kind of see how it goes. But I would anticipate Miles Turner being the most common screener with a dose of whoever Brunson's guarding, probably Nesmith to start. Although I know, Caitlin, I know we talked about this last season, Nesmith, the worst kind of intuitive screener on the team. So I know the Pacers don't love to go to that, which is perhaps why they'll start Brunson on Nesmith more than anything else, because they want to maybe force the Pacers into that action. What do you think, Deej?
I agree 100% in terms of how they start. And then just really fascinated to see, because the Knicks got all this, they got a great look at and practice finally switching and trying to play and keep the switch matchup in front. Now, with Boston, as good as those guys are at breaking the defense down and getting to pull-ups and step backs, you really don't have to worry about the pass. So the Knicks were, and this is where they really benefited, where they can load up and you weren't worried about Tatum hitting the weak side corner. Whereas Halliburton, I think, is even, I think he's probably better at getting into the paint off the switch. And then you have the added issue of him finding the pressure point as a passer quickly, and you're automatically in a really tough position as a defense. So how much they go to the switching scheme is really interesting. On top of that, now you're asking Karl Towns to play some drop, some switching, some higher shows. And now you have all these different things that he's got to mentally sort of process. Whereas against Boston, primarily it was like, here's what we're doing. And even then he sort of like dropped the ball in a few games, few possessions. I think you have to simplify things for him, but I just don't know against this Pacer defense or offense. Can you do that? Like he might have to just have 5 or 6 things that he's going to have to process on every possession. Like, here are our principles. Here's what we're trying to do. But can he kind of go through the checklist in his head and then execute those?
Nope.
Right. So that's the thing. So and I agree with you, Benjy. And that's where I think it's going to be really problematic for the Knicks if you're going to
Mobley
ask.
And Allen had a tough time.
Yeah, it's hard. It's so hard. And I thought he impressed me offensively in terms of scoring and producing in the ecosystem that was not designed to take advantage of his skill set. I thought he came out of that with some really good things he can carry over offensively. But since game 1 of Detroit, I think the defensive performance from Towns has been really spotty at best. And that, of all the things we're talking about, like, how is he holding up and dealing with all the different things he's going to have to mentally navigate, saying nothing about the physical limitations? Man, I don't know. I'm interested to see how he handles it, but I'm really concerned about it.
Caleb?
I have a lot of thoughts here. A lot of things have been said. So blitz is not a good solution for the New York Knicks to play against Tyrese. It might look like it by the box score, and there might be some people that will be like, Tyrese only attempted 5 shots. This is terrible. I can tell you that when Tyrese passes out of a blitz, they are more effective than the number 1 pick and roll offense in the NBA by a wide margin. So I would not recommend that. I'll just put it that way. Switching is still the best thing to do against him. Weak to switch. Actually, the best thing to do against him is to use like Deuce McBride, face guard him the whole length of the court, try to force him left, and then try to switch it. That is what I would say is still probably the best. That being said, this playoff run is the best that I've seen Tyrese be at attacking switches, and not only just with how good he is at pre-reading like a scram and playing through the weak side corner with his preemptive reads, but also with his ability to drive those switches. By the end of game 5, Jarrett Allen wasn't on the floor anymore because they had bothered him enough.
And when he's making his step back, Caitlin, it's like literally impossible. I mean, he was making him late in that series, and it's like, what do you do?
Left to right crossover, now he's in the paint.
And that being said, though, the Pacers scored 1.162 against the Knicks in drop this year. So they absolutely cooked the Knicks with Karl-Anthony Towns playing drop. Mm-hmm. So the one thing, too, is, and the defense was better for the Knicks in game 5 against Boston, but in game 4, it was somewhat telling to me because when Tatum's no longer available to play, The Celtics have their highest volume of passes per 100 of any game in that series. The Knicks switched more than they had in any game in that series, and they gave up 1.362 points per possession, in part because the Celtics were running more movement actions to beat those switches. It was more ghost screening. It was more stack screens. These are things that are very key elements of the Pacers offense, particularly the ghost screening stuff that the Knicks seem to be somewhat confounded by. So I guess my follow-up question to this would be, because I have not seen it happen in a game, but I'm guessing it likely has. How often do they put OG Anunoby on the 5? Would they consider putting OG Anunoby on Miles Turner?
Not enough.
Yeah. Has it happened in this?
So, like, against the Horford-Porzingis lineups, I mean, depending on how you want to define that, they had OG at times on Porzingis and Cat on Horford, but that's not, they're both kind of stretch fives. They don't do it. They don't do it. They barely do it. Now, they're early in the season. There were a couple of matchups. I'm trying to remember which one. It was like, oh, here they go. Tibbs has OG on the 5, but it has barely happened. And as much as I wonder about, I guess the other issue I have with that cross match, if Towns is on Siakam, is I feel like Siakam is particularly effective at drawing fouls in the exact way that Cat is susceptible to committing them. It's like the lunges, the quick stops, they're just going to be a lot of hip checks. And Siakam, to his credit, is really good at kind of feeling that and then lunging out and drawing those fouls. It terrifies me. And he already had 4 fouls in every game against Boston. It is going to be an issue. He will be in foul trouble, whether we like it or not. So maybe it doesn't actually matter who he guards. But the Siakam part of it scares me. The ability to shoot and then drive the closeout, and then Towns trying to reconnect to the drive is like just a recipe for fouling disaster. So I just don't think they're going to go to it a lot for those reasons, and just Tibbs being Tibbs. But I don't know, Deej, what do you think?
I don't think they're going to go to it at all, to be honest with you. Yeah. So I think we're going to get sort of what we've been seeing, and it just puts a lot of pressure on Towns to hold up in ways that he hasn't consistently shown that he can do for a playoff series. He does it in spurts, but again, there are times where you'll get the fan base screaming, why is he in drop? Why is he in drop? Well, because he just decided on that possession that he was going to get to the level of the screen, and now he's got to play drop, and you're giving up Tatum open threes on pull-ups. So there's so many times where he is he's actively going against the design scheme in ways that you can see by how the person guarding the ball is defending.
He's passively going against the design screen more than actively.
Yeah. So that's and it's just, he mentally, it's just hard for him to engage in a way that where he's locked in for 38 minutes a night. So that's going to be where I think of all the swing moments of this series, or swing performances, like how he's guarding the ball as a screen defender, is going to be huge.
So, Kayla, so assuming that's not the case, assuming that OG doesn't get any time, is there something you think the Knicks can do? Anything? OG on the 5 to me is a good idea in a vacuum, at least in some parts of the game. I just don't think they're going to go there.
I actually don't think it's probably going to be that good of a solution, because if they put OG on Miles Turner, they'll just screen with Pascal instead. It's like I said, they'll just use Pascal as the screener more frequently, and Miles will just space to the ball side corner.
Yeah.
But the two things that I would say that you might have a chance with, but I do not know how long it would take Tibbs to be willing to do them, is have a change of heart, quote unquote, and start Deuce McBride instead of Josh Hart.
Oh, yeah.
Because one way or another, no matter which way that the Pacers start, the Josh Hart possession is either going to be what I think that they might ultimately get to, which is Miles Turner providing passive size at the basket and roaming off, with Nesmith doing the Karl-Anthony Towns cross match. But even if it isn't that, then it's going to be Pascal roaming off of him, which is Pascal's most natural defensive role, or it's going to be a hiding spot for Tyrese Halliburton. Those are the three things that are possible if he's in the starting lineup. That becomes a little bit more difficult, as we saw in the series last year, if it's Deuce McBride, because if Tyrese is guarding Deuce McBride, he can't do the whole I'm going to show and recover and then just peel off to the perimeter with somebody else taking Josh Hart rolling to the basket. It's a little bit harder to navigate empty pick and pop actions between Brunson and McBride if Tyrese is the screener defender. So that alone gives you some incentive to do it. But also, as much as I respect OG Anunoby as a defender, which I do immensely, I wanted him to play for the Indiana Pacers. I don't think he's the ideal Tyrese Halliburton matchup. There's a reason why Nick Nurse didn't have OG Anunoby ever guard Tyrese. Darko didn't have OG Anunoby guard Tyrese. I think that if you can have somebody face guarding Tyrese the full length of the floor, despite the fact that this did not work for Cleveland, I think I would feel a little bit better. And as much as I like and appreciate Andrew Nembhard, it will shift more of the offense to Andrew Nembhard and to Miles Turner if that's what you do, despite the fact that Andrew Nembhard and Miles Turner are a top 4 pick and roll combination right now. That's how good they have been.
Wow.
So I guess my long-term thing here is I don't think there's a lot of good answers for how you stop the Pacers offense. I really don't. And the one that I think is the main one is something that the Knicks coach is very resistant to doing. So
it's they actually did play the lineup in Game 6 for a certain amount of minutes, which they hadn't. I mean, I don't know. I don't have it in front of me in terms of the total minutes that lineup has played in the playoffs with Deuce in Hart's place, but it is very, very small, and the regular season is very, very small. Despite it being the only true 5-out lineups the Knicks can play, which theoretically should unleash Karl-Anthony Towns to be his best self, which you would think would be important considering the investment you made in Karl-Anthony Towns when you traded for him. But they haven't done it, and it would accomplish multiple things. Now, Hart's been very good defensively in the playoffs, but Deuce gives you that element of ball pressure, screen navigation the Knicks don't really have on the roster outside of him. He is the best at it on the team. You add the fact that you now actually force teams to make a decision as to whether their center should or can or has to guard Karl-Anthony Towns because they're shooting actually all over the floor around him. But the Knicks just haven't done it. Now, maybe because they did it in Game 6 a little bit, maybe we'll see more of it. And I've said throughout the playoffs, it hasn't happened yet because a lot of wild reasons that we're all amazed the Knicks are even where they are. There's going to come a point in a series where Tibbs is going to actually have to ask himself if he must take Josh Hart off of the floor. And it's going to take, for him, because he loves Josh Hart as much as he does, and for a lot of good reasons, it's going to take a lot of desperation. But I just feel like at some point, whether it's this series, whether maybe it's the next, at some point, he's going to have to actually make that decision. And it just hasn't happened yet. But it's been a problem in Knicks land for the whole season in terms of that lineup getting very little play.
7 minutes, by the way, in the playoffs for that group.
Big time.
So,
big sample size.
That's wild to me. That's wild.
It's insane, Kaylin. It's insane. It hasn't been going on the whole season. It's just
and the Knicks don't play any zone either, do they?
0.
Because that's really
one out of bounds play they did. They had a 1-3-1 for
2.
one.
No, there's one in Game 6 also.
Was there 2?
Yeah, that's been 2 total 1-3-1 zones against the baseline out of bounds, but otherwise there's been 0 possessions total in the season.
And the Pacers have figured some stuff out about that, but the offensive rebounding in the zone were really the only reason they lost a game to Cleveland. Otherwise, that probably would have been a sweep. But Samson, go ahead.
A lot of you guys have been spending a lot of time shopping at the Raptors store. And it sickens me, these two teams. It sickens me, I have to say.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Like the most encouraging thing about the Knicks' performance in Game 6 to me, because Game 5 was a disaster, Caitlin, to your point, in terms of navigating ghost screens, quick actions that suddenly the Celtics realized they have to run. Of course, if the Celtics had been running that since Game 1, we wouldn't be here right now. I don't know if we would have taken to Game 7. I don't know what would have happened, but certainly the Celtics win one, if not both, of Game 1 and 2 if they realize isolating after a switch is not the only option. And we can run another ghost screen. We can run 2 more ghost screens. If you get the Knicks moving and making decisions, that's how you defeat them. And the Pacers, of course, do that more than any other team in the league, which is why, in some ways, it's a very good matchup for the Pacers against the Knicks defensively. What I will say is Game 6 was probably the best I've seen the Knicks look in terms of navigating those actions. They did learn from Game 5. One of my favorite plays of the game was actually ended up in a foul on the ground on Mikal Bridges, but it was just an action between Derek White and Drew Holiday setting 3 or 4 screens in a row for each other, trying to get Brunson in the action. And the Knicks stayed one, they switched one, they stayed another, they switched another. Mikal ends up with the matchup and ends up on a foul on the ground. But just to see them navigate 4 different actions in a row that way was like extremely encouraging. There were 3 Spain actions run in Game 6. The Knicks actually covered them all well, whereas in Game 5, the 3 Spain actions all resulted in wide open catch and shoot threes. I hope that they've learned enough. It's just, I don't know if that was a one game, just a surreal performance defensively by the Knicks, if it was the Celtics letting go of the rope a little bit, if it was a combination of all those things. I do think the Pacers present a whole different challenge, though, and I worry how the Knicks navigate all of their motion for sure. So we'll see.
I wondered, because when I was watching back, they ran that double drag for Derek White, and when it was the 2 big lineup and Karl had to step out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that as the Knicks? I do wonder about some stuff like that. Obviously, there's the Jalen Brunson of it all can flatten this in a number of ways with what he can create offensively, and there can be big games for the Knicks. But there are some like hard questions defensively.
There's no question. And when you can't answer them, like to your point earlier about just like, hey, let's just play zone for a possession and see if we mess them up. Like when even that's not a question, and it's just like every single possession is just how do we navigate a series of pick and rolls and ghost actions that the Knicks struggle to do. Now, I think having Mitch out there, when how much do Cat and Brunson have to play together, just generally speaking, is a question that Tibbs, of course, answers with as much as possible, but you don't have to answer that way necessarily. And the Celtics did this a lot, is just bring both those guys, whoever those guys are, bring them into the double drag, right? So make Brunson and Cat make decisions on possessions. And I'm sure the Pacers will do the same thing. And how do you switch both of them? Does Bridges/OG navigate through both and just fight his way through and push guys and do what he does to get all the way through so you can stay home? But man, it's a tough formula for the Knicks. And I wonder if you can just limit those two together a little bit more than they have, if it helps you. Then you can scram switch out one of them at times and just try to pre-switch stuff and see if you can get away with it that way. But I don't know. DJ, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's a central question to how they defend in this series. And then you have, the pace and the cross matching and getting matched up in semi-transition. That was obviously a big issue in Game 5. They had a team meeting about it. But it's like it's been a season-long hurdle that this team can overcome for a game or two. But history says they're going to revert back to the same communication breakdowns that have plagued them through most of the year. So it's quite possible for the optimists to say, listen, this team has figured something out. And in Game 6, as any indication, they can maybe take away some of the early offense advantage that the Pacers could theoretically have. But it's a different, you guys know this better than anyone, it's a different beast to do it against the Celtics for a single game compared to this Pacer team for a potential long series. So that to me, more than the half court issues, which are real and going to be prevalent, how do they get matched up? And are they just, allowing easy catch and shoot rhythm threes and forays to the rim, Obi Toppin corner threes, rim layups? So how are they mitigating those things? And if they can limit that, then I think they have a chance to defend well in the series, but it just remains to be seen. And I think you have there's more evidence than not to say you should be skeptical of the Knicks doing that for a sustained period of time.
So the one thing that might work in their favor is that I think that Brunson will guard Nesmith. I really do, because that happened more often than the regular season, and Nembhard ran more pick and roll than Halliburton against the Cleveland Cavaliers. Nembhard was basically running point guard in the prior series.
Is that because of the face guarding and trying to keep Halliburton out of
right? And they've liked some of the actions that they run with Tyrese starting away from the ball to try to be like a counter for that. But because of that, I tend to think they're not going to want Brunson guarding that many on-ball screening actions if Nembhard's running that much pick and roll again. So if it's Nesmith, the Pacers are going to have a harder time getting Brunson and Cat involved in the same action at the same time, because it's not like Nesmith's going to be doing a lot on ball, because there's not going to be a lot of stuff that the Pacers are going to run where you're going to get both of them targeted in the same play.
Yeah.
What do the Pacers like to do to get Halliburton back in the on-ball action when he's off ball? And what are they doing to try to get? Are they running to some DHOs where he can get to his right hand cleaner? Like, what are some ways that they are able to weaponize the fact that he is starting off ball?
So the top things they'll do if he's seeing exaggerated coverage is sometimes they're just really capable of playing 4-on-4, and he'll literally stand on the logo and they'll just create extra space. If they want him to get back to the ball, it'll be like an away reject, so he's rejecting the stagger, and then he becomes the stack screener in Spain, and he leaks out, and then he gets the ball from Nembhard, so that they can sometimes if teams switch it, then they get the more preferred matchup that they want when Tyrese leaks out. And yeah, I mean, they're typically using him as a screener in some way, shape, or form, and he's gotten more physical at that over the year, where he might, screen his own guy for Nembhard to get downhill. But it won't be much of Nesmith doing things on ball, except for like I said, in spot ups, attacking closeouts, those types of things.
I have a question. So basically, the way this conversation is going and the way that teams guard Hart, you can infer that a Hart jumper is the desired outcome for a lot of teams if they can shape it that way. You guys, if you're trying to what is the desired outcome you guys have for a Pacers possession?
I want to see, if I'm the Knicks, I want to see Halliburton dancing. And it's not a great solution because, but to me, when the Knicks can avoid rotations and the Knicks can stay out of that and try to be helpers in passing lanes, no matter who, whether it's on a switch, whether it's on the initial matchup, like I think the only way they can slow this team, and I mean that both pace-wise and efficiency-wise, is to force Halliburton to create advantages one-on-one. That's how I see it. Yeah.
And Rick Carlisle will be like, timeout, that's too many isolations.
There you go. Right. So I think that's like
one of the number one things that'll lead to a timeout. They don't get back in transition. They give up more than one offensive rebound on a play. They've isolated twice in a row and they didn't score. Timeout. It's too many ISOs.
There you go.
These are important things to clarify for sure. It's like, what do you attack? You know?
Yeah, and the Hart calculus is funny too because, man, he's been once again, as Josh Hart finds a way to do, he makes his threes in the playoffs. And I know people hand wave that he made 5 in game 5 threes. It's 5 for 9 or 5, and like, okay, you hand wave it because yes, Cornette was messing things up everywhere else. But is there a breaking point for a defense? And 5 for 9 is great. Like, and he made a couple again in game 6. Like, how willing are you actually? And what is the calculus there? So, look, to Hart's credit, he seems to do this every year where he makes people ask questions. Nick Nurse in the Philadelphia series last year famously answered a press conference. He was like, "Yeah, we stopped playing that way because Hart was making a bunch of threes." And Mazzulla, I think, is so principled. And Mazzulla was never going to change the way he played because, like, this is how we play and this is what we do. Other coaches might be more flexible in terms of how much is Hart punishing that. Caitlin, do you think that, like, Carlisle, if Hart comes out game 1 and goes 3 for 5, is there any change to the way they approach it?
It all depends on how they start out. Because, like I said, I will not be surprised in game 1 if they stick to script and it's Turner on Karl-Anthony Towns, Siakam on OG, Nembhard on Bridges, Nesmith on Brunson, and Tyrese on Josh Hart. Which I will say that Tyrese, that won't just be a hiding spot. He's been more active defensively where you can trust him to know when to cheat and where and into passing lanes, but I won't be surprised if they go to that. I guess an interesting follow-up question to that, though, is if they progress beyond that and think, no, this isn't working because we need Nesmith to be able to press up closer to Brunson because of what happened in game 1 of the regular season, and we got to get somebody else roaming, whether that's Miles, whether that's Siakam. Who would you be more happy for Tyrese to guard? Mikal Bridges or OG Anunoby? Who would you be like, that's an advantage for the New York Knicks? More so. I mean, it'd probably be somewhat for both, but who would you be happier about?
It's funny, Mikal, I don't think it would be a great advantage for him, to be completely honest. I think for Anunoby physically, especially with getting some early post-ups and transition seals, I think he can take advantage of that. And especially off there, like Chicago zoom action where you can get him to his right hand. His drives are, and Samson, you know this better than anyone, his drives are always an adventure, but when he can get to his right hand, especially with a size advantage, it's usually pretty good. And then you can throw in this little step back from about the free throw line. It's reasonable efficiency there. So I think with Anunoby's finishing under the rim off 2 feet against a guy like Halliburton, I think you can maybe get some good stuff out of that. Hart and Towns are both really good at finding him in those situations. So I think that's where the Knicks could glean more advantage. With Mikal, I feel like he gets to the same shot diet regardless of who's defending him. It's a matter of if the ball goes in or not. So I think it's more of an OG thing where you can maybe take some advantage. Benjy, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I agree. And I think in the Celtics series, they didn't really like any of the OG matchups because White and Holiday are just bulldogs on the ball and like can force turnovers on OG to make the not worth kind of those little post entries in semi-transition. But Halliburton, they'll go to it. And especially if OG ends up on Halliburton on a switch and he's first out on transition, like he will seal and he will get down there and then make a play out of there with his little rip throughs and he draws fouls. He's pretty good at it. So I would say Mikal, my only hesitation there is that like Nesmith to Indiana, OG is the Knicks' least intuitive screener.
That's what I was going to say.
And Bridges, I think maybe my favorite part of his offensive game.
He's the best screener on the team.
A tremendously smart screener and just mover generally. Yeah. Cutter, he just fills space. I always call him the grease to the offense. Like if things are stuck, he'll make a little cut here that just kind of greases the wheels for them and creates something out of nothing. And that would be my only counter. And I think it's a good counter. And then maybe it makes it a little closer in terms of the difference between OG and Mikal, because they run those 2-man actions with Mikal. He's slicing off, catching, getting into the paint, and making a play. Whereas OG's probably more of just like a roll into space and then catch and then figure it out kind of guy. So that would be the counter.
I agree with you. Mikal is, whether it's a show or a straight switch, he's really good at screening underneath and just staying under and slipping into space. And then, as you mentioned, he's much more dynamic finishing in that area. So I think that's where it is interesting to if you're going to require a host of screenings from one of those two players, Mikal by leaps and bounds is just, I think he's the best overall pure screener on the team, because I don't think Towns is necessarily great at it. And Mitch has gotten better, especially just free a big body to free up Brunson. I feel like he's improved in that area, but Mikal is really good at just maintaining a low leverage and then weaponizing that in space. So that would be the counter. So that's a good thought to see if you can maybe take advantage of some of those like really hard shows by Halliburton and getting into some space with some advantage.
I think, because as you said, the odyssey that an OG Anunoby drive can be is typically when he has to change course, or like Halliburton doesn't have the physicality to necessitate that. Like I think the lines that OG will be able to take to the rim will be quite direct. Whether and there's some early work, post ups and stuff like that. But as you guys said, like working to his right hand, it really would put pressure on the Pacers, I think, to bring help. And I think probably I would trust the Pacers to try and sort things out with Tyrese guarding in space and trying to be like predictive off of Mikal than OG. But I mean,
the screening aspect of it concerns me a bit, simply because of Game 5 last year. When Bridges started screening as much as he did, Tyrese ended up guarding more screens than he ran screens as the pick and roll ball handler. So I think an aspect of this for both teams is you might have to guard Brunson by forcing him to guard, and you might have to guard Tyrese by forcing him to guard. And another dynamic, both of these teams were a lot more willing throughout the regular season in games that I watched to be like, you know what, we're going to switch with Brunson and let him sink or swim. And we're going to switch with Tyrese and let him sink or swim. I think that theory is going to get tested, because I don't think either team is going to be real thrilled to switch Jalen Brunson directly onto Tyrese, or to switch Tyrese directly, certainly not simply onto Brunson. I think that will get tested, how much they're willing to do that.
Especially with like the wear and tear on Brunson to bring the basketball up, and now to ask him to like play a heavy switch scheme, he's going to play 40 minutes at least. That is a gauntlet, man. So we'll see.
I thought the Celtics bailed them out a little bit. There's a lot of like elbow jumpers from Jalen. There was a lot of like settling on the Brunson.
It is like
switches.
This is not a podcast about the Celtics, which that team is going to obviously look very different next season. But look, DJ and I are like extremely surprised to be here. And I think if there's a primary reason that we're here, it's the Celtics letting the Knicks off the hook on the defensive end. It's just, it was, I think, the theme of the series, with the exception of Game 5, was just the willingness to isolate the first switch and to your point, just like bail the Knicks out and not make them make decisions. It's just remarkable. So here we are.
The advantage, I mean, to the Knicks' credit, it was, when you have Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby in heavy gap help, it is a lot to sort of navigate, especially when you are not a great passing team. So that's where the Celtics, it's part their deficiencies as an offense to how to navigate that. But also, I think the Knicks were pretty, if it was the first time we really saw them unleash, maybe in a way we didn't necessarily assume before the season started, but unleash these wings in terms of really putting the pressure on them to show their length, be big, like be in gaps, make them make decisions. And then obviously we saw the Celtics being really unable to do it. If they weren't driving the switch, getting into the paint, they weren't able to generate good looks out of it. The Pacers are obviously, as we've talked about, like a different beast in terms of like their processing ability, especially Halliburton at the point of attack. So it's going to be a different area, different problem, probably a tougher problem. As good as the Celtics are, this is a tougher test, I think, for the Knicks offense.
And the Knicks were able to force a lot of turnovers on Brown and Tatum. And as we know from Caitlin's brilliant work, you're not turning Halliburton over because he's just good and he doesn't turn the ball over. And despite being a high risk passer, which is what do you call it, Caitlin? You had a word for it in your article that I'm forgetting, or title of your article. The
immaculate exception.
There it is, the immaculate exception. So we're going to have to handle the immaculate exception for at least 4-game series and at most a 7-game series, and we will see how long it goes. And so before I let you guys go, because this has been awesome, and I really appreciate you allowing us to pick your brains. It's been an awesome conversation. I'm going to go around the table here, and I'm going to force you to make a prediction because I stink. And I'm also going to ask for one more short observation that we haven't talked about. Any little skill from a certain player that might make a difference. We barely talked about the Pacers bench. So maybe there's something there. Just a quick observation, something to look out for the folks at home. So a prediction and then one more observation. Caitlin, you start us off.
Sure. Put the pressure on me to be the one that goes out on a limb first. I will say that the Knicks' offensive rebounding is a concern. The fact that the Pacers don't have super clear-cut answers against their 2 primary scorers is a concern. However, I'm going to err on the side of optimism and pick Pacers in 6 as the outcome of this series. Can't believe I'm saying that at this point in time because I would have picked the Knicks to beat them a year ago. I did pick the Knicks to beat them a year ago.
We did, yeah.
Yes, all 3 of us.
I felt confident in that.
Smart folks we are. Yeah.
And then my follow-up will be a tiny thing. I've been looking at bench players and who could potentially, this could be, a Jarris series. This could be a Ben Shepherd series. This could be a Jarris series again because they do have one other person that they could throw at Brunson. TJ McConnell's fallen off a little bit with his point of attack defense since he was also pegged as the Brunson stopper, wrongfully, in my opinion, a year ago. However, Jarris has a lot more length, and I thought very quietly for a few possessions in the one game that the Pacers did win during the regular season, I was like, oh, he just sat on 2 of Brunson's counters. That could be something. So they at least have one extra body that I'll be watching as to somebody else that they could throw out there. We'll see how much Carlisle trusts him in that type of a role. But that's the thing that I'll be looking out for.
Awesome. Samson?
The thing I'm looking for is I covered Pascal and OG as they won a championship. I covered, I've talked to both the guys. I know both the guys. Kyle Lowry used to call them his beloveds. And so this in Toronto is known as the Beloved Bowl. So
awesome.
We've talked about, at no point during this conversation are we going to be like, how do you attack OG Anunoby? Because that's not what an offense wants to do ever. However, I assume there's going to be some possessions where it's not really Pascal guarding OG too often, but Pascal will try to score on OG. And I've watched it a lot in practices, and OG always had better practices than Pascal. And we didn't get to see it that much last year. I really want to see how that goes. And also, just for villainous reasons, Pacers in 7, Tyrese in the Garden again, some sort of legacy there.
God.
I guess we could go with that.
Just kill me now. Did
Yeah, thing to watch. Deuce McBride went 12 for his last 24 in threes. He started to make shots in the Boston series to go along with his defense, to go along with what he brings as a floor spacer. He was always his actual individual performance was always transcended by his impact in the lineups that he played in, but finally started to make shots. I think it's huge for this team that is only playing 7 guys. So hopefully he can continue that level of shooting. And Benji, I'm glad you're going last here because this is going to be 3 for 3. I'm picking the Pacers, and I think I can't pick them in 7 because I don't want to do that to myself. So I'm going to pick them in 6.
Sheesh.
Let's go.
I don't know how the Knicks at 7 guys manage a long, tough, physical, mentally draining series against this team, and it's going to break my heart again. But Pacers in 6.
Did you say 7 guys? Because I haven't even talked about Precious Achua yet, Samson. Shall we?
Shall we?
Shall we? Is he the 8th guy? But I mean, look, if you want some switchability on Halliburton, now if you play him with Josh Hart, Tibbs, I will go over there and I will find you. Do not play him with Josh Hart.
I will send him a thank you card if he says
But if there's foul trouble, I mean, he did very, very few spot minutes against the Celtics. It's not crazy to think he'll see some minutes here with foul trouble / hopefully not an injury, but whatever. I know Samson will be thrilled if that happens. I'm so glad that Caitlin touched on TJ McConnell because Knicks fans all over the world, whoever watching this, are going to be very upset that we haven't delved in onto one of the classic Knicks killers of the last 10 years, TJ McConnell. And I guess, just generally speaking, the substitution patterns is the kind of something I'm looking out for, because Tibbs has a tendency to leave those starters out, especially in the third quarter for the first 6, 7, 8 minutes. And man, if the Pacers are subbing in and McConnell's bringing a wave and Obi's bringing his pace, the way those guys can play and you throw bodies, I think Tibbs has to be, even if it's 7 guys, which it might be, I think it's got to be earlier. You can't leave lineups out there. You can't not have fresh blood out there to deal with the Pacers' pace. So I am watching out for the substitution patterns. How does Tibbs handle that, keeping his guys somewhat fresh against a fresher, deeper basketball team? And prediction? I'll take Knicks in 7 because I'm a loser homer.
Let's go.
And I want to go out on a limb. So I'm going Knicks in 7, and we will see how it goes. So anyway, this has been amazing, guys. Thank you, all 3 of you, for being here. That's Caitlin Cooper, of course, from Basketball She Wrote. If you're not a subscriber, become a subscriber. If you're a Knicks fan, you should always be a subscriber because it's the best basketball content out there. If you're a Knicks fan who's not always going to be a subscriber, then subscribe for the series so that you have the best opposing view of this series that is out there. So if it's short-term money, please do that. Subscribe to Basketball She Wrote. Samson from Raptors Republic. Am I missing another publication or platform, Samson? I want to be careful.
No, I'm very loyal to our end.
So Samson's the best there is covering the Raptors, and it has been amazing covering the Pacers as well. Samson, we're gonna have a conversation soon about RJ Barrett's offseason, but we don't have to do that now. There are some fascinating questions in Toronto who didn't do very well in the lottery, unfortunately, for the folks up north.
Dude.
And you all know DJ Zullo very, very, very well. I don't need to say any more about him. But guys, this has been amazing. And I look forward to talking to you guys more throughout the series. It should be a lot of fun. Enjoy the games, everybody. This has been a KFS X's and O's show. Oh, we should plug our Patreon, DJ. We have an opportunity. If you're a Pacers fan watching this and you want to deal with the best Knicks content out there for the series and beyond, please sign up for the Brunson tier of the Knicks Film School Patreon. You get all of my and DJ's work. We think it's good. We hope you'll hang out with us. So come do that.
It is good. I subscribe to it. It's good. It's the best Knicks content out there. I will return the compliment and the favor. We
appreciate that. So yeah, this has been the KFS X's and O's show with Caitlin and with Samson, presented by Fanatics Sportsbook. It's been a pleasure, guys. Have fun this series. Talk to you guys soon.